Okay, folks. Well, my name is Susan Downs, and I want to welcome you to the Silicon Valley Health Institute. We're a nonprofit organization where we want to get health information out to the public so you can use it to make your health better and progress on your path toward optimal health and wellness. Today, we are lucky to have Dr. Russell Jaffe. He's PhD and MD, and has many years of experience in areas of health and wellness as opposed to disease management, sick care. He received his BS, MD, and PhD from the Boston University School of Medicine in 1972. He completed his residency training in clinical chemistry at the National Institutes of Health, remaining a permanent staff member until 1979, and he's board certified in clinical pathology and in chemical pathology. As a physician and scientist who aspired to be comprehensive, objective, empiric, and experimental, he started his career searching for deeper understanding, wisdom, evidence, and insight from the mechanisms of health. Through intense curiosity and learned skepticism, he sought to debunk the best-known advocates of a variety of health promotion and healing systems. He started as a journey to disprove holistic forms of health, it's led into a rich educational experience that transformed him into a student, then a researcher in various modalities, which are very important, such as traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, active meditation, homeopathy, and the manipulative arts. Motivated by this transition, he started the Health Studies Collegium, a think tank that focuses on sustainable energy, alternative solutions to global health needs with his fellow colleagues. For the last 30 years, he advocating treating people, not diagnoses, and not the consequences of health issues. And he wants to promote long-term sustainable solutions as an alternative to a system dominated by prescriptions, symptom suppression solutions. His cumulative experiences enabled him to take his efforts one step further, and he built the PERC Integrative Health company that offers scientifically proven integrative health solutions that speed the transition from sick care to healthful caring. So welcome, Dr. Jaffe. We are indeed honored to have you here.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me back.
Okay.
Am I muted?
No, you're not.
Oh, okay. So thanks for that introduction. Yes, I've earned all these gray hairs. I maintain a fellow status in a number of different societies from which you can conclude that either I'm easily bored or I have a Jewish mother or both. And yes, I am a senior fellow of the Health Studies Collegium, and I'm the founder and chairman of PERC Integrative Health, Eliza Biotechnologies, and RMJHRX. And I can easily be reached online or through the internet. So let's rethink health together. Let's bring that back one slide. Predictive biomarkers guide personalized care. I don't know why it's advancing, but we'll keep it. Predictive biomarkers guide personalized care, goal values. I'm sure there's a way to stop that. Goal values allow evidence-based care. Now, what do I mean by goal values? This is the best outcome value for the predictive biomarkers so that you can personalize care. I'll bet today you compare results of lab tests to some statistical range. That's fine for populations. That does not give you any useful information about individuals. And in fact, very often the individual in front of you is not a member of the cohort that was used to standardize that statistical range of the test. So goal values are a new paradigm. We have introduced this paradigm. We have been advocating for it and advancing it for the last 10 plus years. The net result is to add life to years and years to life, to improve health outcomes, to lower costs and risks. And to give you a sense of the headline, there's 1 million lives a year that can be saved and $1 trillion a year that can be used to speed the transition from sick care to health care. Now, let's see if we can go forward. So what are the tests that you would do to cover all of lifestyle, to cover all of epigenetics, to cover all of what you would need to know about. I'm going to start in the upper left in the green. You see hemoglobin A1C, which gives you a measure of average sugar and insulin activity over the last number of months. Going around to the right, you come to HSCRP, high sensitivity C-reactive protein measures inflammation and repair deficit. Then homocysteine, methylation, and an all-cause mortality morbidity indicator. Lymphocyte response assay is your immune system tolerant or overly working and under functioning. First morning urine pH is the next in yellow. That gives you information about magnesium and choline citrate need. Vitamin D is called a vitamin, but it's really a neurohormone, and you need to have a vitamin D level of 50 to 80. Your omega-3 index should be more than 8%. Your 8-oxoguanine, and that's an unusual test, but it's a urine test. It's a non-invasive test. It's the measure of damage to your DNA. And you want that as low as possible, less than 5. So these are the 8 tests. We surveyed 100,000 laboratory tests and procedures, asking a simple question: what will cover lifestyle and epigenetics completely? And to our pleasant surprise and amazement, these 8 tests meet that standard. Now, this is a graphic representation that says 92% of your lifetime health is choice, lifestyle, and epigenetics. 8% you can blame mom and dad for. 8% is genetic and transgenerational influences on health, which is an emerging area of interest. This then has to do with gene expression, and now predictive biomarkers give you information that's useful for that individual years before subclinical disease and many decades before chronic disease takes place. And if you're starting at chronic disease and then you apply this paradigm, you reverse the process substantially in months, not in days, not in hours, in months, not in years, in months. So wellness is a trending topic, as you can see from this presentation of the components of wellness. This includes some articles that we have written and others, but I would want to just emphasize that lifestyle, the fundamentals of life, determine the quality of your health. Your past is behind, the future has not come. In this moment, we can choose health. And we have myriad articles on the evidence and support for this hypothesis, if you will, this idea of science that gets upstream at the causes, does not focus downstream on the symptoms or the signs of ill health. Because the signs of ill health are almost all repair deficits of one sort or another, or imbalances of hormones and neurochemicals, or digestion and metabolism, all of which is included in what I've just headlined. So let's start and look at these predictive biomarkers, how relevant and useful they are. Hemoglobin A1C. This is the chart that I use with colleagues and consumers. If your hemoglobin A1C is less than 5%, that's excellent, and says you have a 99% chance of living 10 years. Really? Including at 90? Yes. We even have nonagenarians measured. If their hemoglobin A1C is 5%, they have a 99% chance of living over 100. In contrast, if your hemoglobin A1C is typical of most Americans, you are sacrificing much life substantially. I know on the internet and online and in cable, they want to get your hemoglobin A1C down with medication to less than 7. Well, I get it to less than 5 with lifestyle without medication, and medications, all medications to lower blood sugar have collateral side effects that to me make them passé. I take a pass on all of them. I don't need them. If you will follow this lifestyle program, you will gain these results. In my case, when I weighed 65 pounds more, my hemoglobin A1C was above 5. I've lost the weight and kept it off for now 10 years or more. I'm not going to find it again. There are herbal solutions, including Banaba, corosolic acid, but standardized in a certain way, 250 milligrams. And Agnes castus, Aunt Agnes, a famous herbalist's joke, Aunt Agnes. And French lilac, a certain amount. And bitter melon from Chinese medicine, a certain amount. And chromium in the citrate form and vanadium in the ascorbate form, a certain amount. And these are all available in a single soft gel to help regulate naturally blood sugar. Second of these predictive biomarkers, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, HSCRP. How important is this in regard to cardiovascular medicine, let alone overall health? Well, 2 Americans die every minute of avoidable lifestyle caused coronary events. That's roughly 550,000 a year. My HSCRP, and I want yours to be less than 0.5. As you see on the bottom of the slide, HSCRP less than 0.5 is the goal value. Above 0.5 suggests repair deficit inflammation and the need for antioxidants, buffering minerals, and other essential cofactors. How important is inflammation? Well, inflammation relates to everything. If you look to the left, inflammation relates to arthritis and autoimmune disease and diabetes. If you look up and to the left, it relates to cardiovascular diseases. If you look straight up, it relates to cancer and pulmonary diseases, and to the right, Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative prion diseases. All relate to inflammation. All are misunderstood because pathologists see inflammation. As a physiologist, as a biologist, I see repair deficit. I see the opportunity to repair. I don't see a fire to be fought. So what do you do? If your HSCRP is above 0.5, you do a C cleanse. If you're healthy, you take half a teaspoon. Moderately ill, a full teaspoon. Chronically ill, 2 teaspoons. Every 15 minutes, every 15 minutes, every 15 minutes, another dose. And most people will cleanse within an hour or 2. This is a few thousand people. As you see on the far left, the yellow are asymptomatic people, and they cleanse on less than 5 grams. Orange, little symptoms, minimal symptoms. They cleanse between 5 and 15 grams. The green, 80% of people, between 15 and over 100 grams. And then the red, there are some people who need a lot. This personalizes the amount of antioxidant that you need. Ascorbate in the nature's form of ascorbate is nature's protective maternal antioxidant that sacrifices herself so that all other antioxidants can be regenerated and restored and preserved. So vitamin C, ascorbate is very important. Going along with vitamin C, as Albert St. Georgi taught us since the 1930s, flavonoids and flavanols, specifically quercetin dihydrate and soluble OPC. These are polyphenolic ascorbate synergists. These help ascorbate work better. They're separate but important cofactors. They protect and activate structure, collagen, elastin, connective tissue are all repaired with the help of ascorbate and these polyphenolics. They are nature's antihistamine. They are nature's steroid-sparing agents. They activate elective protective mechanisms, detoxification, and recycling and repairing of what is worn out and needs to repair. So polyphenolics are the colorful elements of foods. We have done review articles and several updates of review articles, my colleague Jay Srimani and I, and we have pointed out that while there are thousands of flavonoids and flavanols, there are two that are distinctively the most safe, bioavailable, and effective, and they are quercetin dihydrate, not any other quercetin dihydrate, and soluble OPC, soluble orthoproanthocyanidin. So, yes, the colorful aspects of food are the polyphenolics. That's why you want seasonings and spices and colorful foods. The HSCRP goal value is less than 0.5. And the way you get there is with C-cleanse, superfoods, superfruits. This happens to be a pomegranate, but any dark food, fruit, or berry qualifies. You want enough methyl cofactors to keep your urine sunshine yellow. You want to eat bio-detoxifying foods. You want high sulfur foods as part of your biological detoxification. GGOBE, garlic, ginger, onions, brassica sprouts, and eggs. GGOBE is the acronym for these high sulfur foods. Notice I specifically suggest bulbs of garlic per person for a meal, a thumb-sized piece of ginger per person cooked into the meal, red onions or shallots, because white and yellow onions are too manipulated and contaminated today. Brassica sprouts, all sprouts are good, but brassica sprouts, broccoli sprouts are the best. And eggs, but specifically goose, duck, or chicken. Goose, duck, or quail eggs. Chicken eggs are too contaminated. Even the free-range organic eggs, you can't trust a chicken egg. The chicken is unhappy. The egg is contaminated. And then butyrates, or foods that are high in fiber, that feed the healthy microbiome of the gut so that you have a healthier digestion, and EPA, DHA, yes, from foods, but also from supplements, because if you take EPA and DHA and you distill them under nitrogen, you remove the bad and you concentrate the good. And most Americans, according to Artemis Simopoulos and the N. Haynes data, have much too much omega-6 and much too little omega-3. So supplementing with omega-6 is not needed. Supplementing with omega-3 is needed in the beginning intensively, and then with more complex essential fats, always distilled under nitrogen, so they're protected, always micellized, so they're bioavailable, always the better, not the worser. So, how about homocysteine? Now, it has a chemical name, but homocysteine. Homocysteine was first identified by Kilmer McCulley in the 1960s as relating to atherosclerosis, coronary artery disease, and heart attacks. Then it turned out it related to life in general. So homocysteine has to do with methylation. Methylation has to do with homocysteine and methionine. In biology, it turns out it's almost always a ratio, almost never something absolute alone. So you want your homocysteine to be less than 6. You want your methionine to be elevated, but not too high. You can over-methylate, and that's a problem. You can under-methylate, and that's a problem. It's almost always the Goldilocks scenario, just right in the middle is just right in biology, and the ratio follows. Homocysteine related to everything now, from cardiovascular disease, as you see on the upper right, to osteoporosis and diabetes, and coming around to mental function, pregnancy complications, Alzheimer's disease and dementia, neurodegeneration. Homocysteine related to all of this, all of this. It's a simple amino acid. It's very important to know what your level is, and accurately. The standard homocysteine test has limitations. It has limitations because as soon as you draw the blood, within half an hour, homocysteine is leaking out of the cells and into the fluid, into the plasma, into the serum. In fact, one of the very large labs here in the United States will not process a homocysteine specimen if it's been more than 20 minutes from the time it's drawn until it's spun. So accurately done homocysteine should be less than 6. You want an accurate test. This just reinforces what I just said. The specimen must be spun within minutes after the blood draw to be accurate. And if you want to lower your homocysteine and raise your methionine and improve your methylation, you want garlic, ginger, onions, broccoli, sprouts, and eggs. And then you also get the benefit of sulforaphane, IP6, and minerals. And we have introduced, pioneered, and documented the value of glutamine recycled by PAC, because the lining cells of your and my intestine need energy so fast that they can only get energy from glutamine. They don't get energy from sugar. They don't get energy from any other source other than glutamine. But if you give too much glutamine, you could build up glutamate, and that would create another problem. So we figured out how to recycle glutamine so that you take 1/10 the dose, recycle it 10 times with PAC, get the benefit without ever raising glutamate. All good, no bad. Targeted supplementation, absolutely necessary. For example, what we call Vessel Health Guard is a combination of B components to improve your methylation. And by dissolving these under the tongue before swallowing, you get them to the brain first and then the body. And even if you have digestive problems or maldigestion or dysbiosis or enteropathy or any of the many problems, including long digestive transit time, you overcome all that by dissolving under the tongue Vessel Health Guard. Then we have what we call PERC Livigard Forte. We have continued to improve when we have found reason to improve. These are micellized soft gels that have multi-components from silymarin to CoQ10 to carotenoids. Notice the carotenoid family, not just beta-carotene. All micellized to triple the uptake and bioavailability of the components to support your liver. And also your spleen and kidneys, but at least your liver. Here's 3 people, one of whom happens to be my dad, and over just 3 months, they took Vessel Health Guard and their homocysteine consistently decreased substantially. How about immune tolerance? How important is it for your immune defense and repair system to be able to both defend you and repair you? Lymphocyte response assays are the standard that gives you all the information you need and not confusion. You want to have a balance of defense and repair. And I include the word delete because your immune defense and repair system is responsible at night for eliminating abnormal cells, that's called cancer cells, that may have formed during the day. They eliminate them by apoptosis when they're given the right signal from the pineal to the pituitary, from the pituitary to the hormonal, neurochemical, immune defense and repair system. Turns out there are many microbiomes: your skin, your nose, your mouth, your lungs, your GI tract. They tend to go together in the sense they're either in balance or out of balance. And 80% of Americans alive today have an imbalance, not a balance. You can just look at their digestion. Start with digestive transit time. Ideally, you would eliminate foreign invaders before they get in. And you would reduce your exposure to bad or harmful or foreign materials or toxins if you could, and you can. So to review very quickly, we have an adaptive immune system with a natural side, which is passive maternal protection. It turns out the baby is protected for about a year from the mother's immune defense and repair system. And then we have active but natural adaptive responses to the infections of life and childhood and life in general. But then we also have now artificial immune stimulation, either passive, which is antibody transfer infusions, or active immunization, which there are more questions than answers. So we want to tune up our immune defense and repair system because we have 50 billion dendritic, wiggly, fibroblastic, granulocytic, WBCs, white blood cells, each capable of recycling 50 pathogens. When they have enough ascorbate and antioxidants, when they have enough magnesium and buffering minerals, when they have enough of the cofactors to work. Then you have no allergies, you're tolerant, you neutralize infections and allergens. You can both defend and then repair. Your defense is usually more in the daytime. Repair is more intensively done during restorative sleep, if you get restorative sleep. And here is one of the big issues in regard to delayed hidden immune burdens. The reactions in the body, the symptoms can occur 3 hours to 3 weeks after the exposure. Look up Schwartzman reactions. Look up Jelen-Coombs. Look up Riot. They all pointed out that history cannot give you enough useful information to decide about delayed allergies. You have to know the person well. And then in 1983, we introduced the first cell culture lymphocyte response assay that I want you to know about. Now, I include this slide for a simple reason. Many people will tell you, who have not done cell cultures, that cell culture is very hard to do and very hard to know an endpoint. So on the left, you see non-reactive lymphocytes under our microscope. On the right, you see reactive lymphocytes under our microscope. I rest my case that you can see the difference. So there are 4, according to Jelen-Coombs, 4 types of immune reactions, and I want you to understand the differences. Type 1 is what you may think of as acute allergy. This is histaminic, RAST, testable, IgE related. Then you get to type 2, which could be IgA, mucosal, or IgM, or IgG, and could be protective and neutralizing or harmful and complement fixing. And if you just measure serum, if you just measure antibodies, you will never know the function. Then there are immune complexes and T cell responses, which you can only get from cell culture. You get all of this in the lymphocyte response assay, a comprehensive functional ex vivo. We're measuring in the laboratory exactly what happens in the body. We pioneered this in 1983. We've done over 100,000 specimens, 30 million cell cultures. To reiterate this again, there are immediate reactions. These are histaminic. Then there are delayed reactions, type 2, 3, and 4. We measure them all concurrently, accurately, with less than 3% variance. So we're quite precise, sensitive, specific, and predictive. We can now do more than 500 cell cultures if you send us the specimen. We test the most foods, additives and preservatives, environmental chemicals, toxic minerals, including heavy metals, medications, molds, danders, hair and feathers, herbs, all of which could be individual specific immune burdens. Then we developed and have applied widely this health appraisal questionnaire, what we call the HAQ. You answer the health appraisal questionnaire, we do the cell culture, that gives us information to guide a lifestyle program for the next 6 months. With supplements, activity and environment recommendations, a rotation diet if requested, and a guide, a book to motivate, inform, and inspire called The Joy in Living the Alkaline Way, which is digitally available. This is what the digital report looks like, personalized report. And now, just a word about why this is so important. You probably have heard about leaky gut. You may be concerned about it, but not know exactly what it means, because we don't really know exactly what it means. But we do know that about 3/4 of your immune system lines your digestive tract. These are called Peyer's patches. I'm so old that when I was a student, we were told that these were vestigial or vestigial if you were an academic, which meant we didn't know what they did, and so we assumed they weren't important. Now we know that this immune lining is in constant conversation between digestion and metabolism, interfacing between them, and is very important. Now, on the left, you see a healthy intestinal lining, which is very irregular. With inflammation, repair deficit, there's a collapse of that surface area, and therefore maldigestion, dysbiosis, enteropathy, etc. What we call leaky gut means that in the intestine, the gap junctions open up and let bad, foreign, toxic materials in. That's unfortunate, but the product of repair deficit inflammation. And then you become host to bacteria, parasites, viruses, and prions, etc. But if you have enough ascorbate based on the C-cleanse, then your redox potential is so low that these are prevented from multiplying. And if you're not doing the C-cleanse, your redox probably is too high and you are hospitable. Now, just a word about how important and how simple GI transit time measurement is. The average, when I made up this slide, was 36 to 96 hours. It's now longer even than that. This allows for toxin reabsorption. This drains metabolism. This provides chronic GI, gastrointestinal, and systemic illness. Healthy is 12 to 18 hours. What you have at night should come out in the morning. You could have too short a transit time, which is not a long enough time to digest properly, and then you have malnutrition and malabsorption. Short bowel is very unusual if you haven't had surgery. If you have had surgery, you might have short bowel syndrome. And again, the Goldilocks scenario, just right is just right. 12 to 18 hours is the healthy transit time. How do you measure transit time? We recommend charcoal. You could use corn kernels, but there are reasons not to. You could use beets, but there are reasons not to. You want dioxin-free charcoal for human consumption, 6 to 12 capsules, which is 1.5 to 3 grams of charcoal with 8 ounces of water between a meal, and you mark the time. Then when the black crumbly stuff comes out the tush, you mark the time. And the difference in hours is your transit time. Don't be surprised if what you eat on Monday is coming out the next Monday. So what do we recommend for health promotion? Substitute for any LRA reactive substances, correct nutritional deficits with evidence so that you reduce defense and repair deficits, you initiate detoxification mechanisms biologically, you lower the burden, and then you enhance the biodetoxification. And you thereby concentrate on evoking the human healing response, which has always been available, but unfortunately is suppressed too often by medication or by attitude of the health profession that depreciates the human healing response and calls it the placebo effect. Well, I think this is the human healing response, and 1/3 of almost any benefit is from this innate human healing response. So I think we should honor it and enhance it. Now, we have done a number of outcome studies, including in fibromyalgia, which is muscle pain that won't relapse or respond to proper treatment. Published in the Journal of Musculoskeletal Pain, the premier journal of fibromyalgia. In just 6 months in the community, best efforts, 50% less pain, 70% less depression, 50% more energy, 30% less stiffness, published some years ago by my colleague and I. Here you see the evidence. Now, we normalized all the data, so before it's all 100%. At the midpoint, all 3 look better, but at 6 months, and this is the important point, this is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes about 6 months to really go through a cycle of recovery, and you may need 2 or 3 cycles before you're fully recovered. If you look at the post data, the control is almost back to baseline. We've lost the placebo effect. Primary fibromyalgia continued to improve, and secondary, which means complicated fibromyalgia, improved even more because it came off a lower baseline. How about diabetes? We've done 2 studies, type 1 and type 2. In both cases, starting from best standard of care according to the American Diabetes Association, in our experimental group, but not in the control group, we saw a full 1% decrease in hemoglobin A1C in both the type 2 study and the type 1 diabetes study. That means we added 20+ years of quality life. We also saw an 18% reduction in insulin, so hyperinsulinism reduced by 18% in the type 2 diabetics. Actually, anti-insulin antibodies were reduced substantially in the type 2 diabetics. When we made up this slide, we had only done 70,000 cases. Now we've done over 100,000. And we have an abundance of patient and practitioner case successes so that you can match up the probability of improvement with whatever situation you have. This is just to show you some of the data from the type 1 and type 2 diabetes study. The sweeteners were surprisingly causes of immune reactions in about the same prevalence in both type 1 and type 2. Notice toxic minerals were much more prevalent in type 1 diabetics than type 2. Environmental chemicals were all too common in both, but even more prominent in type 1. Additives, again, prominent in both, but more so even in type 1. And cow dairy, more prominent in type 2, distinctively. Published in the peer-reviewed literature. How about metabolic acidosis and its risk, which is about mineral status and urine pH? The urine after rest should be 6.5 to 7.5. The pH of the urine after rest should be 6.5 to 7.5. If you're less than 6.5, you have metabolic acidosis until proven otherwise, and you need magnesium and choline citrate in larger amounts. If you're healthy, you're in the green zone, 6.5 to 7.5. Goldilocks wins again, yes. If you're consistently above 7.5, you might have catabolic illness and you're tearing down your muscles, joints, and bones. And you need to reverse that. Catabolic illness comes from stress. Catabolic illness comes from surgery. Catabolic illness comes from medical procedures. It does take about 6 hours for the urine in the bladder to equilibrate with the lining cells. So you get once a day a non-invasive measurement of metabolic acidosis. During the day, there are over 20 different variables that influence urine pH during the day. Saliva, interesting. If you could get pure parotid saliva, that would be fine, but the thing that comes out of people's mouth is spit, which is a combination of serosanguinous fluid because their gingiva is not fully intact and repair deficit is common. So saliva pH is not reliable. First AM or first after rest urine pH is the measure, is reliable, is done by the individual on a daily basis, and you increase from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 the doses of magnesium and choline citrate that you take based on your morning urine pH. Now you want to eat more alkaline-forming foods, and here we have the food effects on body chemistry chart that we put together many years ago, not based on acid ash residue, based on the full biochemical analysis of the foods. 80% of what you eat should be on the more alkaline right-hand side of the chart while you're recovering, and 60% should be alkaline when you're well. I've already mentioned, and I want to emphasize that if you want to triple the uptake of your magnesium, you want to take it with choline citrate. You take 2 capsules of magnesium and a teaspoon of choline citrate in any liquid to overcome the magnesium uptake block that almost everyone has. And you thereby form tiny nano droplets that are taken up by neutral pores, and we have an outcome study, some of which we presented, some of which we're still to present, that shows tripling of the magnesium, correcting the choline deficiency and energizing the citrate energizes the mitochondrial battery of the cell. So you get a trifecta. The Alkaline Way brings healthy balance. I mentioned the Joy in Living the Alkaline Way booklet, digitally available. This provides information about alkalinizing foods and water. Hydration is very important, but with healthy water. Activity and first morning urine pH measurements, adjusting your magnesium and choline citrate accordingly. Relaxation response, abdominal breathing, green dichro light and sunlight. Eating in harmony with your nature and lifestyle. Eating locally grown, vine ripened, organic or biodynamic as possible. And making restorative sleep a priority, we show you how. Working your muscles and stretching and relaxing in balance. Many people exercise without stretching before and after. Many people exercise without the benefit of recycled glutamine to improve their peak performance and speed their recovery. Abdominal breathing I mentioned, but the science of breath is very important. There's also, this is a cute little diagram about how important breath is, but there's also a book called The Science of Breath by my colleagues Swami Ajaya and Rudolph Ballantyne that lays out the science of why it's so important to breathe deeply and abdominally and all the myriad benefits thereof. I will just mention that if you want the fluids of your body to get to the cells of your body, you must stretch. so that the fluid gets to where it needs to go and then can take away the waste and give the nutrients. So stretching from the cellular level to the macro level, very important. We happen to have a permaculture biodynamic food forest at our home. It's now 13 years old. It was started by my son after spending several years studying permaculture and biodynamics around the world. And we eat as much as possible from the garden. Vitamin D. Yes, that's 25 hydroxycholecalciferol. That's what you want to measure. And yes, it's called a vitamin, but it's really, really a neurohormone. And the goal value is 50 to 80. The average American is 20. That's normal in a statistical sense, but that raises your risk of heart disease and cancer and autoimmune disease and chronic degenerative disease and neurologic disease. So the goal value for vitamin D is 50 to 80. Most people need drops under the tongue to get there. Yes, you do need a little K2 to go with the vitamin D. We have combinations of many stripes and flavors that will provide you the basics. And then in addition, drops under the tongue to go to the brain before the body to get your vitamin D into the 50 to 80 range. Dr. Mike Hollick is known as Dr. Sunshine. He's one of our many experts. The vitamin D solution is one of his books that just points out the many, many very important neurohormonal features and functions of vitamin D. At least increase your healthy fish. Now, this means the eyes of the fish are still clear, so it's never been frozen. It's line caught and as local as possible. Farmed fish, do not eat farmed fish. Be very, very careful at restaurants because whatever the waiter and waitress and cook and chef say, almost all today for economic reasons, even at the very high-end restaurants, they get farmed fish, frozen. I see Susan is shaking her head, and I agree. Don't do that. Go to the few places that make whole foods. They will tell you, we're a restaurant that starts from scratch and makes whole foods. This has to do with your high sensitivity CRP, with that inflammation and repair deficit. This has to do with your interleukin-10 levels. This has to do with your insulin resistance. So vitamin D, very important. How about essential omega-3 and omega-6 fats? So this is the omega-3 index or omega-3 test. It should be less, it should be more than 8%. EPA and DHA are necessary because most Americans, 80% plus, take in too much omega-6, too little omega-3, and specifically EPA and DHA are needed because the conversion of the precursor, there's a precursor form of omega-3 that does not get converted properly in most people because of exposure to toxic metals and other toxins. So you want EPA and DHA distilled under nitrogen. You must distill it under nitrogen to take away the harmful elements and concentrate the good elements so that you enhance immune function, improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, improve brain health, reduce triglycerides, increase metabolism. My colleague Artemis Simopoulos has written extensively about this in articles and books. Bill Harris, who developed the omega-3 index, is a colleague and a friend. And my omega-3 index, for full disclosure, happened to be 16.4. Now that was desirable. It was more than 8. So I called up Bill and I said, is 16.4 better than 8? He said, we don't have enough people that have that high an omega-3 level to know. He's a very honest scientist. I'm happy that my omega-3 index is high. And it's high because I take 5 to 8 grams a day of EPA DHA. 5 to 8 grams through soft gels daily. Goal is more than 8%. This is what the report looks like. You get a lot of information, which if you decode it, or if you're interested, I can help you decode. That can be very, very instructive. And now the last of the predictive biomarkers, DNA oxidative risk. This is a urine test, 8-oxoguanine. This is a marker of oxidative stress and antioxidant status or antioxidant need in the nucleus. It's a urine test. You can see on the right of the slide the many, many situations where this is a very predictive test. So I would include this as part of my 8 predictive biomarkers. This completes the suite of tests that covers all of lifestyle and epigenetics. You want, as you see on the top of the slide, the goal value for 8-OHDG is less than 5. Most people are in the 25 plus range. That shortens their life by more than 10 years. This relates to toxic eating, what I've been talking about in total, because much toxic eating has to do with eating ultra-processed foods. Distress. There's a certain amount of stress in life that will motivate you, a certain amount of stress that will harm you. Metabolic syndrome, metabolic acidosis is all too common and overlooked. Chronic hospitality to pathogens, which means a high redox potential and too little ascorbate, is common. And repair deficit inflammation, more than 80% of people have an HSCRP of greater than 0.5. These are all lifestyle epigenetic modulatable, and if you follow our guidance, you will achieve your best outcome goal value. This is what we call the WellGuard program, which include tests, health assessments, reducing your exposure where possible, and often that is substantially possible, and then restoring and rebuilding with targeted supplementation, but supplements that are bioavailable and active, and an alkaline way to diet and lifestyle. In case you doubted it, comparing 1900 with the year 2000. Now, we're much past that, but compare 1900 with 2000. It was a 15-fold, which is 1,500% increase in industrial chemicals found in the cord blood of women who delivered babies. The average woman had more than 43 xenotoxins detectable in cord blood. Both the mother and the baby were being bathed in toxins. That's the past. What do? Well, we correct all of these things comprehensively, specifically, systematically. We banish inflammation because we correct repair deficit. We follow these 8 predictive tests. They're available through us or through others. They're available through Better Lab Tests now and through others. We know what the best outcome goal value is and how to do these tests correctly. So in summary, we want a healthy immune system that defends and repairs us. We want essential, predictive, high sensitivity assessments that provide science and evidence to our program so that we can optimize our health. We want elective, predictive, high sensitivity assessment techniques from the measurement of urine pH to vitamin D, omega-3 tests, and 8-oxoguanine. I suggest you follow me and live the alkaline way. You can choose any cuisine and still live the alkaline way, but use these personalized antioxidative support nutrient intake to support your repair and immune defense function. So it's been a pleasure to be with you for this time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Our first question, we've got a couple people lined up for questions, so we'll let them ask. After that, we'll go through the chat. So, Michelle, please ask your questions.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Hi, nice to meet you, Dr. Jaffe. Thank you so much kindly for this education. My question is related to how this applies to the millions that have long COVID, as their immune health has incredible dysregulation, with many cofactors, and is highly inflamed with minimal, clear, and linear ways of healing to reset it. So curious if you could just share what your thoughts are.
Well, first and probably most importantly, you should download our free ebook on COVID. We came out at the start of COVID. We have done 5 updates. And here, this may be a surprise, but COVID is combined antioxidant, which means ascorbate deficit, plus metabolic acidosis, which means magnesium and choline citrate deficit. There have been thus far 15 studies using oral or intravenous vitamin C, with or without magnesium and choline citrate. Every one of them has been favorable. My friends Amory Lovins and Eric Rasmussen published in medium.com 2 articles, one on the truth about vitamin C and another article on COVID, based on our work. When I last checked, there had been 250,000 downloads. We have asked, as universally as we can, to ask if anyone has followed our advice and had a catastrophe: cardiovascular, pulmonary, cerebral, metabolic catastrophe. Not one. Not one. I believe, anecdotally, this is just anecdotal, so formal studies need to be done. Hundreds of thousands of people have followed our guidance and not one of them has had a catastrophe. So COVID, if you treat it based on the symptoms and the consequences, is a catastrophe. If you download our ebook on what to do and why, you will get the same results that others have, and you will banish COVID.
Just to add to that, we've had Dr. Richard Chang on this program, and he was in China when the whole Wuhan thing broke out and he couldn't go anywhere. So the Dutch donated 2 tons of vitamin C, and they were very successfully treating COVID over there. They published an article, which Dr. Saul, et cetera, published. And of course, it was taken down because the head of YouTube has made it very clear anything on vitamin C and curcumin is going to be taken down off YouTube. But vitamin C is, a lot of people have had luck with it. Other people have found that people who run into trouble have low vitamin D levels. And there's been many doctors who are successfully treating COVID if they get to it in the early stages.
I will come back to the 8 predictive biomarkers and why it's so important for them to be at their goal value.
Any more questions, Michelle?
No, thank you. I think is the ebook basically then at your website on health studies? Is that where we can find it? Health Studies Collegium?
It's on healthstudiescollegium.org. It's on betterlabtestnow.com. It's on perk.com. It's on elizaact.com. And mostly it's on Dr. Russell Jaffe, as in drrusselljaffe.com.
Okay, thank you.
I put one link in the chat for people
thanks.
now to get them started.
Thanks.
Okay, Mona, ask your question.
Mona.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for a great presentation. I noticed that you had a recommendation for homocysteine about getting it over a particular level, but I was wondering if you could talk about whether
less. Homocysteine should be less.
Sorry, I meant getting it under a particular level, but I meant to ask, is there any issue with having homocysteine too low?
That's a very important question. When I said your homocysteine should be less than 6, I'm talking about modern people. If you're on a really exotic, and I mean imbalanced, diet, which is low in sulfur containing foods for whatever reason, or if you're exposed to too many toxins that use up sulfur containing foods that are essential for methylation and healthy translation of DNA and RNA, then your homocysteine could be 4. When I say less than 6, I mean 6 plus or minus a little bit, to be clear. And I'm so glad you asked that question, because it is possible for both methionine and homocysteine to be too low because your sulfur sources in your diet are absent. That's a correctable problem, but that's a problem.
Any other questions, Mona? Okay, Ryan, ask away.
Yeah, you have these 8 different biomarkers. Is there a relationship between any of the biomarkers? That is, if one is out of whack, it's going to push another one out of whack, or are they all entirely independent?
No, everything's related to everything. We looked at that question. Not only have we looked at that question, Jack Winberg has looked at that question. People at the highest level of the United Kingdom health plan wrote a brilliant book on the social determinants of health. And what he says is it's all related to everything, which is to me too easy to say. But I can tell you that if your hemoglobin A1C is 5, chances are your vitamin D will be higher than average. But each of these is an independent marker of an aspect of epigenetics. There are hundreds of tests that measure different aspects of inflammation alone. Hundreds. But they all have strengths and limitations, and the one that it was Rifai and I should think of his name, but a very important cardiologist and a very important clinical chemist showed that HSCRP was the most predictive, especially if you measured accurately the lowest ranges. You didn't do an average CRP, you did a high sensitivity CRP. The short answer to your question is yes. If you're in balance, you will likely be in balance. And if you're out of balance, you will likely be out of balance. But that's the answer to your question. But to me, that's not the personal answer.
Okay. I asked the question because on your 8 biomarkers, I have one that's totally out of whack and all the rest of them are pretty darn close or good.
Let's get specific. It's okay, I think, if you can say whatever it is that's out of whack.
Oh, homocysteine. And
Well,
I take
no,
10
no,
micrograms of methylated, folate a day.
Before we get down that path, make sure that they're measuring the homocysteine accurately. Make sure that the lab is spinning the specimen within 20 minutes or so of drawing the blood. So let's assume that you have an accurate homocysteine and it's the one biomarker that's out of whack, which is possible. But then I would do a plasma amino acid analysis, because then you get methionine and other amino acids, essential amino acids, to make sure that your methionine is okay. Because homocysteine could be up and methionine down, and that would be bad. You want the homocysteine to be down and the methionine to be up. For whatever reason, when you do a plasma amino acid analysis, you get a lot of information, including methionine, and they do not quantify homocysteine. I don't know why they don't. So you measure your homocysteine, at the same time do a plasma amino acid analysis and look at the homocysteine to methionine ratio. And if you still have any questions, call me.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I've had homocysteine tests for 30 years and they've always been high. So
Well,
always
no,
been
no,
over 10.
That then makes me a little bit concerned that you're on the right track to pursue the homocysteine and increase your GGOBE, increase your sulfur foods substantially, and then recheck your homocysteine in just 2 months. And then in addition, you mentioned that you take methylfolate. Methylfolate is widely promoted. It is very profitable. It does not interconvert to the other 7 forms of folate that nature provides. And I only use nature's forms of nutrients, including nature's folate. I will mention that this form of folate was originally synthesized and patented to treat chemotherapy. There was a chemotherapy that's no longer used called 5-FU, which I always thought was a strange name, but it's called 5-FU. And it poisoned the folate pathway. So scientists figured out they could form a methylfolate, which would not interconvert to the other forms. So it wouldn't compete with the 5-FU chemotherapy, but at least the patient wouldn't die of folate deficiency. I recommend you take nature's folate and nature's other forms of B complex, sufficient to keep your urine sunshine yellow.
I liked your sunshine yellow comment. Well, thank you very much.
We should protect our kidneys, protect our bladder, protect our prostate if we're a guy, and so forth.
Okay, next is Michelle Ann.
Hi, I have a question about omega-3, and there's this whole, and I love how you said that it's all a whole, this whole world of ours influencing our body. I recently heard a talk by Will Tuttle where he talks about the depletion of fish in the ocean, as well as the contamination, and that most fish caught in the oceans are given to land animals, not humans. So that is something that is a concern when we talk about omega-3 eggs. And how can we raise our omega by, is it chia seeds, flax? Is there something else we can use?
I'm glad you asked the question. Yes, lots of grasses will help nourish you, provide fiber and nutrients. Grasses include buckwheat, wild rice, not regular rice, not even basmati rice. Regular rice, even organic, has too much arsenic and other contaminants. So you favor grasses, you don't eat grains. Grains are too contaminated, you eat grasses. Grasses like buckwheat, wild rice, millet, sesame, quinoa. Quinoa's in vogue right now. So you eat grasses, you eat low on the food chain to reduce your exposure to toxic metals and hormone disrupting solvent residue chemicals. Then in specific regard to what you were saying, one of the many reasons to never eat a farmed fish is there's undetectable omega-3 in farmed fish. There,
There's also the issue of when we talk about cold water fish with that precious fish oil in it, but when we cook it, doesn't it transform it so it becomes inactive? So it's better to eat raw fish than to eat cooked.
well, you can make a good case for sashimi. I said that if you have a line caught fish that has never been frozen, therefore the eyes are still clear, you have a chance of having healthy fish today. I go to the Whole Foods market or the greengrocer market, and there's 40 different fish out there. And I say to the person, what's the one with the eyes still clear and line caught? And very often there's none. So I don't have fish. If you do eat fish, and now I'm going to quote David Quigg, if you eat fish, do not have a test for mercury for 7 days. If I say that again, your test for mercury will be elevated for a week after eating fish once. Oh dear. So if you want to have fish, line caught, eyes still clear. Now, how to cook the fish? If you want the most flavor, if you want the most nutrition, you always poach. You never broil, cook fish. You poach it in some healthy broth, vegetable broth, or some broth, with lots of herbs. Basil, rosemary, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme that counteract the harm. Yes, today it's a challenge to eat healthy food.
Yes, and someone's asking about sardines also, but
Well,
then we need to look at, we're competing for
now-
food with
now-
the
now-
mammals out there in the ocean. So
True. My friend Amory Levins works with the fishery managers of 80 countries. Once a year, he gets them all together and they do simulations that show if you overfish, then the fish collapse and you have no economy. Almost every time, for short-term reasons, they overfish. This is a simulation. This is just a computer model. So yes, the way we have commercialized fishing, agribusiness, dairy, meat, it's all so different than what I would call healthy food that I've taken a pass on all of it. All of it.
Mhm.
Now, we do occasionally have a 100% grass-fed, halal and kosher, humanely rendered lamb chop. We do. If you don't like that, we won't serve it to you.
Is it
No, we
possible to
don't,
do
but-
halal
I'm
and
sorry.
you can't really do halal and kosher because
Oh,
they
yes, you can. Oh, yes, you can. I
they
promise
kill the
you,
animal differently.
I am very skilled in the Jewish faith.
Uh-huh.
I'm not technically a shochet, but I am technically a cantor. I'm not
Mhm.
technically a rabbi, but I know how the animal is slaughtered. There are minor but important differences. But you can, and Whole Foods is one place that nationally sells 100% grass-fed, humanely rendered, halal and kosher, meat.
Interesting. Thank you for bringing
No,
that up.
no, I don't want to get lost in the weeds, but I really appreciate your asking the question, because while many of my friends are Sufi, Islamic, Muslim, and I'm traditionally Jewish, ethnically, we have a lot in common. The Sufis and the Kabbalistic Jews have a lot in common. And just for full disclosure, Rebecca and I had a Buddhist ceremony done by Bhante Dharmawara on Friday midday. Then we had a Taoist ceremony done by Qing Nuan Wu, the acupuncturist who taught me Friday night. Then we had a Methodist ceremony done by Bob Leichman and Olga Worrell at their Washington Methodist Church. Then we had a double Sufi ceremony with Abdulaziz Saeed and Pir Vilayat Khan doing an Islamic ceremony. Then Philip Cassador did the Native American Apache ceremony, and Zalman Schachter Shalomi did our Jewish wedding. And then we went up to New York and had a half an hour alone with the Dalai Lama. So that was a week in our life. I didn't mean to cut off the conversation. What did I address your question?
Well, I'm just wondering if there are any studies that show just purely plant-based raising that baseline for the homocysteine health or health components that come from a good balance of omega-3s. And I'm just really
Well, to answer your question, are there studies showing the benefit of getting more omega-3 through plants? Yes. We can go back to Colin Campbell. His classic work is called the China Study. You can look at Esseltine. Both the husband, the wife, and now the child. They have been championing a plant-based, high-fiber, omega-3 rich diet since the 1950s. And he was a classmate of my friend Bob McCabe, so I know that they've been studying, publishing, and I am amazed at how much literature there is out there in support of some of these ideas that we don't seem to know about. Then you can come to today, and there's a cardiologist, who I'll be talking with on this Thursday on our IG Live at 11 a.m. That's Dr. Joel Kahn, K-A-H-N, a practicing cardiologist in Detroit area, who has been plant-based for at least the last 5 years, and he has published data on himself showing that he's gotten younger each year on a plant-based diet. Of course, you want a healthy diet.
and a healthy planet too, so that we can perpetuate this and be sustainable, right?
If you want a sustainable planet, practice permaculture, biodynamics, and food foresting. I have turned my front yard, which I used to mow. I no longer have anything to mow. But we get a lot of food, 250 edible plants in probably a half an acre, and including at least 15 fruit trees, dwarf.
Mhm.
So if you want to save the planet, follow Renee Dubos. Think local, think globally, act locally. We'll save the planet one tree, one plant, one yard, one home at a time. I happen to live in a rather upscale zip code, but I wanted to show my neighbors and my friends who come here how beautiful how fragrant, and how edible this is. We happen to have 7 mushroom guilds in our backyard. Reishi, shiitake, hen of the woods, chicken of the woods, and lion's mane, and okay. Whatever Paul Stamets says, we try to grow. There is a global network. Michael Pollan has written extensively about how to save our own lives by eating smartly and saving the planet. So it's all connected.
Yes, thank you for addressing that.
Okay, Michelle, ask
Uh,
your
good-
questions.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Jeffy. An extremely interesting conversation here, and thank you so much for your work. I have a couple of questions. The first one is in regards to your GI transit time measurement using activated charcoal. And when you say like to take, like I'm less than 150 pounds, 6 to 12 caps with 8 ounces of water between meals, do I do that one time to measure the GI
Once.
transit, or do I?
No,
One-
you do that once.
Okay,
You mark the time when you swallow the capsules, and you mark the time when the black crumbly stuff comes out your tush, and that the difference in hours is your transit time.
wonderful.
Now, how often would I recheck my transit time? I check my transit time every 3 to 6 months. And
Oh.
it's been quite good for a long time, but I actually do a lot of self-testing. I want to talk from experience with people who might benefit from the experience.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And also I have a question about eggs. I eat a lot of eggs, and I eat the grain, no soy, organic, the best eggs that I can find. What do you think about eggs eating?
Well, what I said is what I meant. If you can get duck eggs, goose eggs, or quail eggs, they have not been messed with. They are traditional eggs.
Oh, yes.
I have investigated to the best of my ability, and I am certain that the organic free-range chicken eggs are contaminated.
Mhm.
The grain that they feed the chickens, even if it's quote organic, what would you feed a chicken who will eat anything?
Mm. Mhm.
Whatever was the most profitable, whatever was the cheapest thing that you could feed them. So you can create illusions. I don't like illusions in regard to health or well-being or food. So I do know, because I belong to a biodynamic CSA. This is a community-supported agriculture group in our area. And they actually get, occasionally, biodynamic eggs from Pennsylvania, from a place that I know is absolutely impeccable. If you can get that, okay. Eggs used to be a perfect food. We used to measure the quality of different proteins compared to egg protein because that was the gold standard. Then eggs fell out of vogue. That's another whole story for another time. They were never bad. They were never really bad, but they fell out of vogue because of the diet heart hypothesis that said how much fat you ate determined your blood fat would determine your cholesterol. That was all because of Levy and Fredrickson. They were all because of 2 very, very, very smart, very important guys. But it was wrong. It was categorically wrong. And it was proven wrong by Don Fry, Bob Maley, Bob Petus, and me. I was the junior member of the team, but I was the one that showed changes in blood clotting and platelet function predicted coronary and atherosclerotic events years before they occurred.
Wow.
That was me.
Wow. Well, thank you. I have actually another question, because you mentioned the best place to eat meat. I happen to eat meat, and I try to get the best meat possible. But did you say that whole food farm meat is?
No. What you want is 100% grass-fed,
Yes.
and humanely rendered. Now, I threw in halal and kosher because I think there are certain things about draining the blood which are advantageous so that the stress hormones don't get into the meat that you eat and stuff like that.
Yes, I do too.
Yeah, so I'm from what I'm hearing, I think you would be very careful. You would get 100% grass-fed, humanely rendered. You might even kind of know the source. And then that's an option that there is nothing wrong intrinsically with meat. Commercial meat today, there's a lot wrong. But it's not the fault of the animal.
Yes.
It's the fault of the farmer or the agribusiness or the renderer or, for example, I decided to treat myself and get some smoked salmon. And I looked at all the salmons to get the healthiest if I could, and it wasn't too expensive, but then I discovered that they had injected sugar, brown sugar, and broth.
Mm.
Now that made it more profitable for them, but that made it unedible from my point of view. So
Yes.
you really need to be careful. I recommend shopping around the outside of the supermarket. This was taught to me by Beatrice from Hunter. They might find Whole Foods on the perimeter of the market. If you have to go up and down the aisles, be very careful and read the labels very carefully. And if there's anything on the label that you do not understand, put it back.
Yes, yes.
So-
Well, wonderful. And my last question, and well, before I would love to tell you, I would love to see a picture of your garden because I just started to garden last year on my little property here, growing my own vegetables. So I'm really into it. But my last question, and again, thank you for your fantastic work, is can you talk about sardines? That's another source of fish that I eat. I don't eat any raised fish. And I'm unfortunately now too far from Quebec to take my fishing line and go and get some fresh trout. So are sardines okay to eat?
Well, let's talk about fish like sardines because there are several different classes. There are sardine-like fish called menhadrin, which exist in very clean water and are actually harvested for the fish oil, because they're also very oily. The fish oil that is nitrogen distilled that we use. You can get sardines in glass. It's a little more expensive, but those sardines are very, very low in toxic metals and very high in good fat. I used to recommend herring. I no longer recommend herring. If you know anyone who's been around like as long as I have, and they remember what really healthy herring was like, and what you can buy today, the herring is embarrassed. Okay, so I can speak specifically about tuna fish. If you get a tuna steak in the market, it will have mercury in it. But interestingly, and this has been multiply documented, if you get tuna in glass, like tuna fish in glass,
Yes.
it's ultra, ultra low in mercury.
Huh.
And why is this? Well, first of all, they catch the younger fish because that's easier to catch. But more importantly, mostly the Japanese, but the people that do commercial fishing, they have found if the fish die from mercury, lead, cadmium, arsenic, nickel poisoning, they won't have a job. They're already overfishing. That's a different story.
Yes.
But interesting to me, I would not buy a tuna fish steak in a market.
Mhm.
But I do have, if people want protein in my home, we have tuna in glass. And we
Oh.
have sardines, some sardines in glass.
Awesome.
The glass is a little heavier. Of course, it's a little fragile. It costs a little bit more, but I'm willing to invest in my kitchen so I don't have to invest in the hospital.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, Ryan.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on the transit time test, which is, do you really need a transit time test if you have multiple bowel movements in a day and it's not your issue?
Oh, well, I'll give you an alternative path, but what comes out today might have come in days ago. And yes, it is better if you have 2 or 3, not none, because some people don't poop every day. They only poop every 3rd day or something like that. That's a problem. Yes, your transit time is probably better, but you still should check. And you can use roast beets. You can eat roast beets at night and see in the commode in the morning, do you see red? I like roast beets. I eat roast beets from time to time. But when I see red in the commode in the morning, my first thought is never beets. So that's why I recommend charcoal. It's an easy test to do. It's a self-care test, and I think it's worth reassuring yourself. If you become reassured, that's good. You seem to be healthy. That's good. But I would still check.
How about beet juice?
Oh, no. This is a very important point. Eat the whole fruit, food, or vegetable. Have the juice sparingly. If you're going to juice vegetables, be sure to use a macerating, low temperature, low speed juicer, like the Hurom, Hurom, Hurom. We have that, and it actually produces a rather minimally wet, but almost dry stream of fiber. We then take that fiber, mix it with currants or raisins, and have it for dessert. Because you need the fiber. So I wouldn't get, I like the idea of fresh juice. Fresh juice is fine, but you shouldn't have too much carrots. You shouldn't have too much apples. That has too much sugar. So you look up Heinerman's juicing encyclopedia or some juicing guide if you're going to juice. And if you're going to juice, get a macerating juicer.
Okay, thanks.
Christine, ask away.
Thank you, Dr. Jaffe. You had mentioned a specific company name for the lamb chops you like. Can you mention that again and maybe spell it?
Oh, sure. It's 3 letters. It's KOL, Cole Foods out of Silver Spring, Maryland. They are now national. They send it to you frozen. And they flash freeze it in such a way that the first time you thaw it, it's fresh.
Great, thank you.
Yes, I do not get paid for that commercial, but I do know Devora, the woman who started Cole Foods years and years ago, but she's built it up into a very big business, fortunately, and kept the quality.
There is a question in the chat. What form of vitamin C do you recommend?
Yes, I recommend Nature's ascorbate, which means fully buffered, fully reduced L-ascorbate, such as Perk, Potent, C, Guard. It is very important that the vitamin C that you take be produced under a nitrogen blanket so that the air oxygen doesn't damage the vitamin C in manufacture. 90+% of the vitamin C that's sold in the United States is not Nature's ascorbate, is not fully reduced. It contains diketogulonic acid, which is an excretory end product that's not helpful. It includes dehydroascorbate, which is the first oxidation of ascorbate. But you want to have fully reduced, fully buffered all L-ascorbates such as perc potency. And the few companies that produce under a nitrogen blanket will want you to know, because it takes effort and cost to do it right. But fully reduced is helpful, damaged is not.
There's a question in the chat, the China study and Esseltine, just another, is that the same as the fire engine diet?
That's a good question. Now, with regard to Colin Campbell, it's called the China study, and it explains not only why a vegetable diet is the healthiest, but it points out things like in the part of China where the soil was depleted in selenium, they had an almost epidemic of stomach cancer until they ground up selenium-containing rocks and spread it over the soil, and the stomach cancer went away. With regard to Esseltine, I mention him because he is still active after half a century, and his wife is very vigorously active, online included, and they preach a plant-based diet, as does Joel Kahn, the cardiologist that I mentioned, as do some others. You don't have to be a vegetarian. You do have to eat uncontaminated foods as simply as possible, with lots of herbs and seasonings. But do you know the most contaminated part of your kitchen might be the herbs and seasonings? Unfortunately. So you want to know the source. You want to get quality, organic or biodynamically sourced materials, and then enjoy. I happen to like cooking. I have an open kitchen, and the kitchen dining area is just one big circulation space so that friends can socialize, we can interact, I or they, somebody can cook, and then you feed the people. I feel like a hero when what I've cooked and what I've gotten from the garden and then what I've cooked is what people like.
Now, somebody is raising a question, is Columbia River farmed steelhead better than normal farmed fish? But I suspect you're going to say stay away from farmed in any case.
That's what I'm going to say. If it's farmed, pass. Are there gradations of bad? Probably. I'm trying to give you guidance, information, inspiration, things that help me. In specific, I can't comment, because if I knew, I would comment, but honestly, there's an awful lot of stuff I don't know, and I find it very easy. Most of my medical colleagues have trouble saying, I don't know. If I don't know, I will tell you, and in this case, it might be better, but I don't know. But the fact that you said farmed, off my list.
Okay, we have a question. What about the plant's defense mechanisms, such as lectins, oxalates, etc.? So I suspect you're going to talk about soaking. But what do you do if there's
well, yes, we eat a lot of beans and lentils and grasses. And yes, we always wash and often soak. But lectins, which I happen to know a lot about because lectins are important in the immune defense and repair system. The lectins were originally scientifically studied because of their impact on the immune system. And most people, medical doctors, who talk about lectins, they wouldn't really know a lectin if they met it. And they shouldn't talk about what they don't know. So they talk about studies when we use pokeweed mitogen or some other lectin in isolation, in a cell culture or in a laboratory, and we get some strong immune response. Do you know you need small amounts of lectins to tune up your immune system regularly? Since you asked, I will say that the diet that I consume that is most heart and brain friendly and cancer unfriendly includes chili, which means beans, often 3 to 5 different kinds, chili once a week, dal, lentil stew, once a week, a curry, once a week, fungi and sea vegetables, once a week, our liquid nutrient plan, once a week. And that, I think, was 6. And whatever you want to do the other day, enjoy. With regard to oxalates, I happen to be the right person to ask about that question because in 1974, I published an article about vitamin C inhibiting occult blood detection, which was an early colon cancer detection technique that today is done 50 million times in the United States each year. And we proved that the prior technology, vitamin C, would inhibit the detection of blood. And then we published technology that was more precise, more sensitive, more specific, not inhibited. And the reason I'm mentioning this is, if you read anything about oxalate, probably something will come up about vitamin C being converted into oxalate, with the implication that if you're at risk of kidney stones, and I'm going to tell you the solution to kidney stones in a minute, but if you're at risk of kidney stones, you shouldn't take in too much vitamin C because of oxalate. That's absolutely wrong. It turns out there is a conversion of a small amount of vitamin C into oxalate that you can see in the urine, but it saturates at the first gram of vitamin C that you take. So if you take 1 gram, 10 grams, 100 grams, you'll produce the same small amount of oxalate. And that's not the problem with regard to kidney stones. Nor are oxalate foods. I eat spinach, which has oxalate in it. But I eat a wide variety of foods in a wide variety of ways. So we have long known that nature's ascorbate helps, that the answer to kidney stones, because I told you I would give you the answer to kidney stones is twofold. First of all, hydration, hydration, hydration. So lots of mineral water, lots of vegetable broth, lots of healthy fluids. Because you can only form a kidney stone if your urine is too concentrated. You can only form a stone if your urine is too concentrated. And this is the surprise. Ascorbate helps, does not harm. A colleague of mine, a very distinguished physician in New York City, did not drink enough water and had, by count, 200 kidney stones. 200 kidney stones. Over 1.5 to 2 years, we dissolved all of them using hydration and ascorbate. So the answer to kidney stones is hydration and ascorbate, and nature's ascorbate is your friend, not your enemy, especially in regard to oxalate.
There's a question about eating anchovies, and another question is smoked food such as BPA-free canned mackerel or sardines okay? Somebody, Mona had pointed out that just because it's BPA-free, it doesn't mean it's BPA-free, because it's misleading. They'll say BPA-free, but it's got BPS.
But the answer there is metal, no. Glass, yes. Whether you have BPA, BPS, or some other coating, all, as in all, the metal has a coating. Otherwise, it would cause oxidation of the food and it would cause off taste and no one would buy it. So metal means, to me, bury it. It's dead. It's too intoxicated. Not me. But you can mostly get healthier choices in glass.
What about anchovies?
Well, specifically anchovies, I get my anchovies. The best anchovies come in glass. And that's because if you get anchovies in a metal can, it will cause a little bit of off taste. So anchovies in glass, yes, but be careful of the oil that they use in the anchovies. Because even if it says olive oil, even if it said EVO, I wouldn't believe it. So I get anchovies that are just anchovies. They're rolled up, they're just anchovies. And there's a little bit of lemon water added to the anchovies in glass.
What company do you get these glass sardines, mackerel, and anchovies?
Boy, that's a good question. I should know the answer to that. It is Italian. The best I can do at the moment, because unfortunately, the best I can do at the moment is you look up anchovies in lemon water whole, anchovies in lemon water whole, and it'll come up. There are 2 or 3. These are boutiques. These are people who love their anchovies, and I have gotten some quite good anchovies from Spain, but you've got to be very, very careful if there's olive oil in it or any oil in it.
I don't know how much more time you have, Dr. Jaffe, but
No, I'm enjoying this dialogue.
okay.
Yes, let's continue.
Okay, Ryan, ask away.
You brought up oxalates. Does that mean that if you have urine oxalate, it shows on the lab test, it's not really a problem. It's really a matter of maintaining your hydration and ascorbate
Well,
level.
yes, if you have an elevated oxalate in the urine, you have dehydration 1, 2, or 3%. Even a little dehydration is a major stress on your cardiovascular system, on your digestive system, etc. So if I had an elevated oxalate in the urine, I would drink a gallon of fluid a day. I would start every meal with something wet and warm. I would make sure that I was peeing every 2 hours because I was drinking almost continuously. What I say is, you get a carafe and a glass. If the glass is full, you drink it. If the glass is empty, you fill it. Repeat. So almost never, to be as clear as I can about this, almost never is an elevated oxalate a sign of anything except dehydration. It's, let's say you love spinach and other foods that were oxalate rich. Your oxalate would be a little higher than someone who didn't like oxalate vegetables, but not much. So that's a good indicator, a good measure of hydration or dehydration. And many people think they're hydrated because they pee occasionally, but they're still dehydrated.
Do you think then that it's best to override your thirst prompting by your body? That is, if you're not thirsty, you need to drink, as opposed to listening to your body?
My meditation teacher for the last 30 years of his life, between 80 and 110, was named Bhante Dharmawar. He taught me a lot, including the fact that he listened to his body. If we're talking about Americans or Europeans, their taste, thirst sensations have been so distorted by chemicals that I don't trust that anymore. So I'm not saying not to listen to your body. What I am saying is if you're not peeing every 2 hours, if you're not hydrating, and I don't just mean tap water, because as you might imagine, I believe tap water is gray water and should not be used for cooking or drinking. I think you should get mineral water in glass, or I happen to have a deep well, 300-foot well, a well that goes through the surface to the water that's 10,000 years old or something. We have excellent water, just good fortune. But most people don't. So assume that what comes out of the tap is gray water. If you doubt that, you can spend about $200 and get a very comprehensive water test done. They will send you the kit. You take the test. Some of it is done at home, some of it's done in the lab. You'd be amazed, or maybe you wouldn't, at how much harm comes out of the tap. You can relatively easily get 5-gallon glass bottles of mineral water delivered to your home. And then you just pour out what you want to cook or drink. And remember what I said, start every meal with something wet and warm. In between meals, have a glass of something pleasurable. I happen to like sparkling water. What comes out of the well is still water. Still good water. I think my taste sensation, my perception of the need for hydration has gotten more and more acute. But I will also mention that Banti did not drink 8 glasses of 8 ounces a day. And he lived to 110. So if you're that in touch with your body, I honor that awareness. But be very careful today, because what you perceive may be influenced by the chemicals in the environment.
Michael, what is your question, Michael?
So nature's ascorbate, is that nature's sunshine, nature's way, nature's life, or nature's bounty?
Well, nature's ascorbate is specifically perk, potency, guard, or equivalent.
Okay, I couldn't find a nature's brand. I found all these other ones.
No, look up perk, P-E-R-Q-U-E, P-E-R-Q-U-E, perk, potent, C, guard. It will.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it will come up. No, but I'm glad you asked, because like the word organic, you can put the word nature or natural on almost anything today, and it may mean nothing. I specifically mean the product that we pioneered in 1987, 88 timeframe and have continued to improve upon. Nature's ascorbate means perk, P-E-R-Q-U-E, potency, guard.
Great, thank you.
Mona,
Yeah, what do you think about the research into H3O2 structured water, Walter Pollack and others working on that research as a form
Well,
of better?
water turns out to be among the most complex. It's among the most simple molecules, but it's the most, in regard to the biology of water, very complex. I go back to von Hippel and Lindau. They were the pioneers looking at the structure of water. Now I'll fast forward. Luc Montagnier, Nobel laureate for his work on HIV, has spent years studying water. And now I will tell you a study that is impeccably documented and mind-boggling. If water has information encoded in it, that might partly explain homeopathy. I'm not a homeopath. Catherine Coulter was my homeopath. George Vitulkas is now my homeopath. I respect homeopathy. So Luc Montagnier in Paris takes the electromagnetic signature from the water of a homeopathic. He takes the electromagnetic signature, no water, no substance, electromagnetic signature of a homeopathic. And he sends it over the internet to Chicago, where he has a colleague who can prove that he has just imprinted that homeopathic potency into naive water. This was published in Nature magazine, which is a distinguished magazine, and it caused such controversy that the editor-in-chief of that magazine resigned and forced them to withdraw the article. Luc Montagnier and Meir Shanitsky, this is the guy who worked with Tom Waldman to discover interleukins. He's kind of important. When you can take science and have it be forgotten because it disagrees with the prevailing model, there's something wrong with the policymakers. There's something wrong with the decision makers. There's something wrong if YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or any of them, if they think they can discern scientific truth from scientific fallacy, that's something we scientists have trouble with. And we work hard to distinguish true from not true, or truer. We actually never get to true, we get to better. You know, you have to understand that science is a process. Now let me get practical. Machines that alter water, whether it be ionization or some other biochemical change to the water, pH change to the water. This is all a kind of pharmacology that I don't do. I have investigated that kind of water from not one, but 3 different sources, each claiming to be better than the other. And it turned out to be 1/3 beneficial. 1 out of 3 people benefited, which is exactly what you'd predict for a placebo. So I'm impressed that you're asking. I think the structure of water is very complex. I don't need to go into the stories, but I was a young scientist when MIT and Harvard and others distinguished scientists were beginning to study the structure of water. And they were mind-boggled at how complex it was. But what exists for a moment, for a second, for a minute, does not exist at a distance. So you may think that you've gotten a certain kind of structured water, but no, you haven't. Trust me, it's more complex and subtle than that. So yes, you can encode information. I gave you the experiment that to me really proves that you can encode information. But what that really says is it's complex. It's very, very complicated. And what you do in a moment probably will not have any impact or effect beyond the placebo a day later.
What is your opinion on liposomal vitamin C?
Well, my opinion is that nature's ascorbate, like the Perk Potent Seaguard, is 100% active and 100% available and goes into cells 100%. With regard to liposomal ascorbate, it means you had to take something other than vitamin C, mix it with the vitamin C with heat, on the basis that what? On the basis that I'm going to increase the bioavailability of vitamin C by making a liposome. That's what I hear. Since Perk Potent Seaguard is 100% available, 100% effective, and 100% taken up, what the liposome does is dilute the ascorbate with whatever is the non-ascorbate part of the liposome and does not increase the uptake. Now, if you compare with commercial ascorbates that are irritating and should never be used, the liposome looks better. If you compare the liposome as we have with ours, it's about half as good.
What do you think about reverse osmosis water?
First of all, I think that water treatment is very, very complex when you get into the details. When you look at RO water, you need to pass 50 liters or 50 gallons or 50 quarts through the filter in order to get 1 gallon, 1 unit out. So I'm a little concerned about how much I'm going to spend for the water. More importantly, and this is the critical thing, reverse osmosis requires a filter. That filter is easily damaged by particles, including little metal particles that are in most water. And now these metal particles impair, create holes in the RO filter. So if I was going to use an RO filter, which I wouldn't, I would change the filter 2 or 3 times more often than the company recommends. And you'll be surprised when you change the filter, how much schmutz has accumulated on the filter. Not to the good of the filter. I actually did, because I'm an experimentalist as well as a person, it turns out that our wonderful well water has copper in it because it goes through copper pipes. Not plastic, fortunately, but copper. So the copper in our water is enough that if you look in the tub after a certain number of showers, there's a little blue, which is the copper sticking to the surface. So I actually bought a 3-cartridge system that sterilized itself at night, backwashed itself at night, and I was putting in calcium chloride or something like that, you know, to mix it up. First of all, the water felt soapy. I never really felt clean. My well water, if you use a Castile soap or an Ayurvedic soap, you get clean. Not only that, it imbalanced the other minerals in the water. It put too much calcium and too little magnesium. And it turns out today that excess calcium intake is a major cardiovascular risk. And we almost all need more magnesium and choline citrate, but we don't need more calcium. So I disconnected it. I'm glad I tested it. It doesn't work for me. So RO doesn't work. This was a multi-$1,000 unit, cartridges, very elegant technology. Okay. I believe we should simplify, simplify, simplify. Know the source of your water and drink healthy water that has minerals in it and is uncontaminated. if you try to correct the water using RO or a filter on the top of your sink, or something elegant like I'm talking about, these multiple cartridges and ion resins and this and that. Almost always you end up getting complications and reducing the value, whereas if you simplified, start with spring water, uncontaminated, drink and cook with that. Many parts of the United States today have water that actually smells. And I have people ask me all the time about showering or bathing. And I do suggest that you put a carbon block filter, if you need it, on your shower or your intake for the tub, if you feel you need it. But again, change the carbon block more often, 2 or 3 times more often than is recommended. Now, the carbon block for shower or bath is not very expensive. An RO system can be an investment. I would save the money.
Any more questions? People could just unmute yourself and jump in. Yeah, I think this can go on quite a while.
No, well, I'm happy to answer any more questions, but I've enjoyed this a lot. I think that we've probably about saturated the good folks that have tuned in. And if you'll, allow me, I will come back at some point in time and we can have another conversation.
Because we haven't saturated Ryan because he's still good to go. And Mona too. So
No,
and Jan. Okay.
Yeah, I've known of you, Silicon Valley Health Institute, for a long time. I've spoken several times. I am more impressed today than before. I've always thought of you as a very sophisticated, interested in the details audience, who's very polite, but knows baloney from salami. So I'm happy to have held forth in this way.
Well, I think that's a signal that it's probably best to continue questions in another forum. So I want to thank you very much and tell our audience our next meeting is next Tuesday at 11 o'clock California time, where Mayor Schneider will return to give us more information on how to improve our vision naturally. But thank you, Dr. Jeff.
One more question that just came in on the chat.
Good.
PERC potency has a balance of calcium, magnesium, potassium, and zinc, so that whether you need 1, 10, or 100 grams, you get a balance of minerals needed to metabolize and utilize that ascorbate. Yes, most Americans take in too much calcium, just calcium. That's why we have $1 billion a year plus of calcium channel blockers sold for hypertension, which cause those calcium channel blockers cause magnesium wasting, but they also block the uptake of calcium. Why? Because it is almost universally thought that you can't measure accurately magnesium because it's inside the cell. And that is true. Magnesium is mostly inside the cell. But Ron Alene 15 years ago, and multiple people have confirmed since then, that chronic latent magnesium deficiency, CLMD, chronic latent magnesium deficiency, can be determined in a serum, simple serum magnesium test. If you're in the lower half of the lab range, whatever the lab range is, if you're in the lower half, you're deficient. If you're in the upper half, you're sufficient. In the study that we have completed, everyone who started with high blood pressure was in the lower half of the magnesium serum range. And there was a tight correlation between reduction in blood pressure and moving into the upper half of the serum range of magnesium. So we know what to measure at serum magnesium. We know how to measure it because of Ron Alene CLMD. And now we can judge how much magnesium and choline citrate we need based on the urine pH in the morning to satisfy our magnesium need for the day.
Well, I think we will ask you questions till the cows come home, although we don't know where they live. So I think in closing, if people know how to get a hold of you, how to take advantage of all these wonderful products and research, your website, and the next
Well,
steps.
drrusselljaffe.com. There's a website, drrusselljaffe.com, which will lead you to many other websites and YouTube videos and short and long expositions on these topics. We try to post 2 to 3 a week of either videos, recipes, or guidance of how to thrive in the 21st century. We have a book, How to Thrive in the 21st Century, which is available on Kindle, in print, as an audiobook, however you want it. It's available. It's an easy read. It'll save your life.
Well, this has been wonderful. To me, it's very exciting because you condense it and you analyzed it, and we can take steps to improve where we're lacking. So I want to thank you very much. You can come back anytime, just anytime you want. It's been wonderful. You're fantastic. And thank you very much. So thank you again.